A challenging climate, strange days, unprecedented times. However we choose to describe it, there is no doubt that the coronavirus has brought upheaval and disruption to global society on a level that many of us have never experienced before. While there's much talk of the pandemic being a great leveller due to its holistic impact on day-to-day life, the truth is far more complex, with individuals, businesses and organisations feeling the effects of the coronavirus in a variety of different ways. The new normal aims to give these people an opportunity to tell their stories, assess the potential impacts of the pandemic on their lives and careers, as well as exploring the challenges and opportunities that have arisen from this era-defining situation. Each week, myself, Chris Webb and Helen Armitage from the Careers and Employability Service at Sheffield Hallam University will be joined by a different guest from the world of industry, educational careers, with opportunities for listeners to put their questions forward in advance of the podcast. Thanks for tuning in and joining us as we explore what the new normal means for all of us on a local, national and global scale. Good morning and welcome to episode 7 of The New Normal. I'm joined as always by my co-host Helen Armitage. Helen, how are you doing today?
Very well, thank you, Chris. Very well. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Someone once told me that most podcasts don't get past episode 6, so we're already in quite a good position. And there's kind of positive vibes going hopefully throughout the podcast today. So today we're joined by Penny Lee, Creative Director and Brand Strategist, who also goes by the Brand Directoress. Penny, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
No, two different answers there. So this brings us quite nicely to our first point, really. It's Mental Health Awareness Week, the week that we're recording this podcast. And it's taken me back to a concept called the Form Score that Rob Stevenson, a mental health campaigner, released and kind of runs this organisation called Form Score. And the idea behind it is to basically each day score yourself from 1 to 10. So 1 would be perhaps in the depths of a mental health crisis, 10 feeling kind of peak lifetime confidence, best you've ever felt. And his idea behind doing this is sort of making sure that kind of people are aware that mental health is a changeable state. It's not something that's the same from day to day. So I thought with that in mind, in honour of Mental Health Awareness Week, we could perhaps give our form scores for the day if we're feeling comfortable doing that. So Penny, where would you kind of put yourself today on the form score?
Well, we'll just say a 3. And not for pity, I'm just sitting this one out a bit today. It was a emotional day yesterday, and sometimes you need a bit of rest and recover. So it's just brain fog rather than depression. So I'd put it at 3.
Yeah, I think that's really important to note that, you know, that changeable state and yeah, the kind of, I suppose, fallout of having a really emotional day. I think often we all feel like that. So yeah, I think that's really important to mention. Helen, where would you sort of put yourself today on the form score?
I'm going to put myself as 4/5 with higher hopes for the end of the week.
Lovely. Yeah. That sounded like a meteorology, like a weather forecast. Yeah. Higher hope fronts coming in. So yeah, that's great.
One can hope.
I think I'd probably score myself a 7 today. Not doing too badly, but yeah, as you say, I think also optimistic for some of the other stuff coming through the week. So this is something that a few of us are doing throughout the course of Mental Health Awareness Week, posting on our social media profiles, our form score for the day, and it is something that you can do every day. So I'll share the links to Rob Stevenson's stuff in the episode notes for the podcast. Now, hopefully, whatever score you're at, the next section of the podcast will give you kind of cause for lifting some of those scores over the next few days. We've got our Gloombusters, our good news stories for the week. So Helen, would you like to kick us off? What were your good news stories this week?
My good news story from this week is more of a personal story, which is the first for me on this section of the podcast. And basically, my dad's hair clippers have arrived, finally. It feels like they've been on hold for weeks now because they've been, a lot of companies have been inundated with hair clippers. But yeah, so they finally arrived. Was able to give my dad a haircut, and he has now said that I've got the job as his personal hairstylist. And I've never cut anyone's hair before. I've literally just watched a YouTube video. But yeah, that's gone well, and yeah, I've got a second source of income, so everyone's happy.
Well, new skills all the time. Every day's a lesson. Penny, any good news stories this week you'd like to share?
Well, it's quite early in the week. But a good podcast that I've was just listening to this morning. Let's go with that. Daisy May Cooper with Fern Cotton. So they have the Happy podcast, so that's positive themed. And Daisy May Cooper on Instagram at the minute is keeping me alive. So if you haven't seen her Pajama Realness TV themed dancing, then you need to. And that was just a really good, honest, heartwarming podcast today. And I think just hearing how other people are coping during lockdown, that everyone's struggling and how everyone's helping each other, I think is some of the best stuff we can be listening to at the minute.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, there can be sometimes in short supply, so that sounds great. We'll give that a listen.
Yeah.
And I think, so finally from me, a positive news story this week. I'm not sure if either of you saw Jay's virtual pub quiz. This is the pub quiz that has actually managed to break the Guinness World Record for the largest number of participants, so over 180,000. But the actual story behind the guy behind it, Jay Flynn, is really interesting. He was sort of sleeping rough 11 years ago, former pub landlord who sort of set all of this up, and is now getting, guest presenters like Stephen Fry, being interviewed on all sorts of kind of media channels.
Oh, it popped up on the Echo, something about a pub quiz with Stephen Fry. Is that what that?
Yeah, so I mean, he's become something of a minor celebrity now, Jay Flynn. So just a really, really kind of nice, heartwarming story, and again, donating a lot of the money from it to charity as well. So bringing everything together really. So nice, good news story I felt for over the last week.
Very positive. Right, okay then, we'll kick off then, Penny. If we could just start by you telling us how COVID-19 pandemic has impacted your life and your work.
Well, life-wise, I've moved in with my partner while it's been going on. We've been together 5 years, so we were taking it slow. And so, we've been living together, and his eldest son has moved in with us as well after the first, when it was like week 3, week 4, and they started letting people move a bit between families. And that's been great. It's been lovely. So that's been a positive that we found out we quite like that. And work-wise, a mixture. So some things have slowed off, but I would say it's been a really good time to think properly about what I want to do.
Yep.
So writing a book has come out of this, which I know is like, oh, everyone's writing a book, you have to do all these things. It's like, it was only last week. It was week 8. I've done the Netflix and I've done the rest. So having some time to really reflect on what I was doing in practice rather than running and putting out fires and answering emails and kind of getting caught up in the flow of it all. Just, it's like a bit of a pause and reflection time.
Yeah.
And also learning and connecting with more people, ironically, than before. Like there's an influx of webinars, so you have to take your time and pick and choose. But I would say that there's been, like, people are much more open to being contacted and vice versa than I maybe wouldn't necessarily watch a webinar and then contact the people, whereas on this one I have done, said thank you, and then they've come. And so I think that's I think that it's really made me consider my practice a bit more about how I approach things. Mm-hmm. And so I'll take a little bit of a slowdown on the other side, but there's also been nice work as well. It's just, I would say it's slowed down, and some projects that were in the pipeline of either they're on hold or we see what happens. Mm-hmm. But there's always stuff to do, fortunately, with what we do. So whether you're learning or reading or skilling up on a new thing, I think, there's always, you're not twiddling your thumbs anyway.
Yeah, definitely. Really positive to hear that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm grateful for the time, if I'm really honest.
Yeah.
And, I wouldn't wish it to be here and for all the trouble it's caused everyone. But while it's here, I'd say the positive side of it is I've really, really appreciated the pause.
Yeah, and I can totally relate to that. I think even though we have become separated, through the powers of technology, it's brought people closer together. And like you say, you are able to connect with people, more people kind of coming out of the woodwork and being open to those connections.
Yeah, and connecting with old friends, and just, it's a little bit, I don't feel that my practice is as bad as a lot for the hamster wheelness of it. Like, I don't commute every day. There's a lot that I thought, I'm not like that, I'm not in that. But the more pause I've had, I've realised probably more than I thought it was.
Yeah.
So a good bit of check yourself moment as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. Okay then, brilliant. So going on to the first kind of discussion topic that we've got here, looking at the bigger picture of the design sector as a whole, what do you think the impact of COVID-19 has been on the sector, and how are companies and individuals adapting to this change?
I think it's been frightening for a few people. I feel in a fortunate position. There's just me. I don't have a studio of a few people that I've got to furlough or look after. So I do think it has affected some things in that way. And it's kind of interesting to see how companies are adapting to that change. I'll be curious to see what happens with studios and studio spaces. I think I'm very much about flexible working, and the business conference in disguise that I set up, the Walking Whiskey Wellness, was very much about, looking at how we work, and is really sitting on a motorway all together every morning, to go to a box in a city and sit all together, to go home and be away from families and paying lots of money for travel and having huge traffic jams and all. Is that really what we need to be doing with the technology that we have? We need some connection. So I hope that some of that stays. I think even if it was just 50-50, I think working from home full time is really hard. I do it more than I'd like. But a bit, I think, is a real I think it could be, time to do more. People have been doing their exercise in the morning, or time for a walk with their family, and it's not time away from work. It's time they would be commuting or traveling or sat in meetings they don't need to be doing. So that would be nice to see if that brought in, and that's kind of business as a whole, but I think for studios as well, have a bit of trust in your staff, just because they're sat at a desk. I think for creative work, it really helps to move about, be in different places, and I think so if that allows that to be a bit, I think it helps the people employed, and I think it helps the work as well. Mm-hmm. So let's see. That would be nice to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, as you say, Penny, it's obviously quite difficult to predict at the moment what might happen.
Yeah.
But do you have any thoughts about how the sector might change, sort of off the back of the pandemic? And I guess also for kind of graduates and students preparing to move into that sector, are there things they could do to perhaps help themselves be better prepared for what might come?
I think me and Helen talked about this briefly last week, where it's just people, and it's always people. Like, if you collaborate, if you see how you can help people, if you get in touch with people, if you're interested in what other people are doing, then whatever situation, that's how we get through it. So that would be my advice, as much as possible. You might have the odd duvet day where you want to hide, but as much as possible, how can you cheerlead someone in a day? How could you just reach out and say, I really love the work that you're doing? Is there a way in this time that you contact people, like as a student wanting to get in, this is a perfect time. Just who's doing interesting stuff in this time? Like who's shining out, that they're reacting really well creatively, and speak to them or reach out to them. So just being active and getting involved. And to me, I think it's always the best way.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we're hearing kind of quite a lot of kind of inspirational messages at the moment, which is really great to hear and really, really positive. But what a lot of students and graduates are wanting to know is, who are those employers that are hiring? It's quite a hard time for SMEs in general, really. They've taken quite a hit at the moment, and the design sector is no different from that. But what a lot of students and graduates, leaving education, going into industry, is they want to find the people that are still hiring. So I'm just wondering if you have any information. Do you know anyone within the sector, or any contacts that you have that are doing quite well in the current time? I had a good think about this and a look, and I think for the most part people are either their own staff are furloughed, so they're certainly not going to be taking on anyone else. However, back to the look at people who are doing interesting things, for instance, there's
the festival is called the Good Life Experience, and Charlie Gladstone, who runs that together with his family, you know, they have a team, including a lot of his family. They announced a thing at the beginning called 50-50, and they made put forward a call out for freelancers and designers and artists to respond to a brief, and then they will pay them and work with them.
Right.
So that's just a one-off, and it was so that was the 50-50 project by the Good Life Experience. There's been a lovely project in Leeds by Laura Wellington, who is co-founder of the Duke Studios. They've been doing some incredible art pieces with designers for the NHS. You know, look to those people, speak to those people as well. See, like, could you be doing something to get involved in that, or does it spur on ideas? And then aside of that, you know, using this time, you know, to what thoughtful things could you do for the people that you'd be interested in working with in the future? Because, yeah, I think if you make it not about, I know this is really hard because it's like not the inspirational stuff, but don't make it so much about you, but how could you help, or what could you do, or what could you provide at this moment that would be really helpful? Because the whole give as get is really true. And also another one that I thought of, which they probably know anyway, but Alec Dudson, who runs The Intern, he's been busy. There's been podcasts and all kinds of stuff. So I think check out his material, and I think he's been having some great chats. He's specifically always looking for graduates like going into industry. So I'd check that out as well.
Yeah, he did a really good interview. I think it was with Craig Oldham that went out last week. Of the office of Craig in Manchester, and it was just a really upfront and honest conversation about the shape of the sector and how it's kind of going to come out of this. So yeah, I think if you can check out Intern, Alec, and also Craig, I think they're really useful people to be looking at the moment.
And also, like, at this time, there's never been so many free webinars and insights from designers, from companies. I mean, Albright is one that I've been watching a few from. So I'm like, there was a lady, really, really funky. She ran a social media content strategy house in LA. And I'm just in my bed watching. It was like, because it was American time, so it was about 10 o'clock at night here. And she gave the most amazing tips for half an hour on it. She's in her living room. Like, we just didn't have access to that stuff at this time. So, you know, it's free. Find out. So Albright have good stuff. Adobe Live is doing a lot. They're doing tutorials and bits and pieces that you can get. And just do a shout out on your socials, like which webinars, which agencies are doing great webinars. I've seen loads of interviews going up as well. So there's like Chris Doyle in Australia who does great stuff. He was an interview with somebody great. Dig all of that out, like watch and soak it up and get their advice and get details of who to contact after. You know, again, like I said, when I finished watching some of these, I've just been in touch with them, have them on social. Like, it's a great connection time. So do that as well. Really, like graduate or non-graduate, like we're all doing it. Like this is, you know, this is a really different time for everybody. And I'd say that it's the most open access and free access it felt like for a long time, which as a graduate going into it is gold.
Yeah, no, totally agree. I think that's been one of the big things that's come out of the current situation, hasn't it, in terms of that availability and access, as you say. And to anyone who's listening to the podcast, what we'll do is we'll put the links to some of the various sort of resources and opportunities mentioned into the episode notes, so you can kind of check those out and have a look at them.
And often when you find one, you'll find the other, and then another. Like, get going with it, and from one that either one gets mentioned or it's on your algorithm and something else comes up. But,
yeah, a bit of a snowball effect type thing.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So, I mean, in terms of the actual makeup of the design sector itself, you know, we've talked a little bit, I suppose, about maybe some of the challenges they're facing at the moment. But I guess to kind of draw on a challenge that's maybe a little bit more historic. We've talked, I suppose, in the past, or I guess you'll have been involved in this conversation in the past, around the sort of gender balance within the sector. And only 17% of creative directors being female, yet we have 63% of graphic design students who are female. So I think one thing we were quite interested to know was, from your sort of perspective, what impact you think COVID-19 might have on the makeup of the sector, and whether it might change to a more gender balanced sector or not, or whether it might not have an impact.
I mentioned I had to think about this one as well, and I don't think it will be the force that makes it, because either you want to make change or you don't, and either you're unconsciously rolling along, which I think if you're doing that, it must be harder to unconsciously roll along at the moment. So I think there's somewhere that's a definite. I think what we talked about with the increase in flexible working, just flexible working helps all parents, male or female going in, it helps spread it about. So things like that can really help. But I think if you want to make change, I think you see those opportunities and you grasp them and you'll really utilize them to speed up some change. And if you're not really bothered, it just won't be your focus. Yeah. And it'll be missed opportunities. So I think either you're into it and you can, use the situation, look at the situation about how it could help it, or not. but then that's reliant on, existing agencies or whatever. And what you could also say is, well, for the next generation coming through and who've lived with this, does that change things? And very much this more open access also makes much more women visible. Mm-hmm. A lot of the webinars I've been watching, Albright is for women, so then you get that, but there's much more visibility of the women in the industry and hearing women speak, and sometimes that's all it takes as well, especially for graduates coming through, being what you can't see, you can't be what you can't see.
Yeah.
You can't talk what you can't talk. So, positively wise, I would really hope so. And I hope that the visibility and the connections and the collaborative feeling that's coming out of this, we've had very poor leadership, but community ground up has been quite tremendous. Mm-hmm. So going on that, I would hope that there's a lot of support, there's a lot more stuff coming through that I've felt myself. And if I feel that after being 20 something years doing this, hopefully graduates are feeling that as well, but you have to look for the stuff as well. You have to be actively searching for those things. But company structure wise, I don't know. I think the companies that already are actively working on it, I think this is a great chance for them, and those that aren't probably won't, but change is coming anyway.
Yeah, I think there's some good points in there about kind of whether the change will happen or not being down to, I suppose, the agency of both the organisations and the individuals. And I think we're hearing probably similar stuff around kind of the Green New Deal and companies kind of committing to sustainability. Those who were doing it before are probably ramping it up, and those who weren't, maybe it's not changing, maybe it is.
Yeah. Or they do it, but they're not really. So, but I do think Pandora's box has been opened on it anyway. I do think that change is speeding up and happening, and I guess when everything is turned upside down, everything's been different massively globally, everyone's situation has been different. I guess the same as what I said at the beginning, where it's given me a time to pause and reflect.
Yeah.
When everything is different and it gives some time for pause and reflection, hopefully there's enough percentage of that does it for the positive. And then, of course, that speeds up change. So, fingers crossed.
Yeah, no, definitely. Fingers crossed here as well. I think
doing what I can to help it as well, being active in it as well.
Absolutely, yeah. I think like yourself though, I think it needs to happen, and I think now there's no better time really. And I think that the mechanics are there for a change within the makeup of the sector. It's just like you say, if the drivers are there for it on the broader sense of things. So fingers crossed, definitely. Right, okay.
Get involved, and there's and it isn't just down to the female graduates coming out as well. Don't be lazy on the other side as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So Moving on to our next discussion topic, which kind of links in quite nicely. We're seeing quite a lot of uncertain economic environment at the moment. It's completely, like I say, everything's kind of been turned on its head. The financial outlook isn't looking overly great for the next few months. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on people setting up their own business in this uncertain economic climate. Some people do shy away from starting a business during an uncertain economic climate, and others kind of jump into it with both feet, and some, will sink or swim. So just wanted to get your views on this. And as someone who's got your own very successful business, you've worked in the sector for over 20 years, you've got that experience, what advice would you give to students, graduates, or other professionals within the sector wanting to go their own way and set up the business during the current climate or within the next coming months?
Well, there's never the perfect time. There's better times. There's never the perfect time. But when we mentioned this briefly last week, and it's the one that made me think the most, actually, from when we just had to look through the question. I think what I said about for with graduates, I still believe, and it's not blanket, because there's some that really feel it. They really feel like, no, this is what I want to do. Absolutely. And there's a lot of success stories of that. But on general, as a rule, I would say make your mistakes on someone else's money. Yep. Build your network. So by working in agencies and different places and even moving around, you can just meet so many more people to start off with, and like build your craft. Like running a business it's hard, and it's running a business. And some people have, you go to agencies and they've got people doing the designing, and they've got business managers and financial people and but so realize that it's that as well. Be aware of that. And if you still are just, this is the right thing for you, then you'll feel it. But I would say just give yourself a bit of time of being able to have a job where someone is you can focus on the work that comes in. Someone finds the work, it lands on your desk, you do it. Someone else organises it often, or project manages it and hand it over, and it's done. And it gives you that space to hone your craft on that. Yeah. So some people, that it just suits some more than others, but I would definitely say it's probably like the 80-20, even 90-10 rule on that. And, nowadays you can really have the best of both worlds. You can have a job, like paid salary, like that security, you go somewhere every month, every month, every day, that's like worked out, but you get paid every month. But you can really rock your own personal profile, with social media, and putting stuff up on Behance, putting stuff up on, make your own website, get your stuff out there, send it off. So you could still be building up your own profile, your own work, being known for your own work. Because what used to happen back in my day is you get lost. Like your work is just done, but it comes under that studio name, So it works for if you go for another job, or someone says, where do you work, or But the work itself most often would come under the studio name, whereas now you can be much more public about the work you're making and for that company, and whether you do extra stuff, smaller freelance stuff on the side, so you can see how that stuff works, how you react to it as well. Well, I didn't start my own thing until I will have been about 30, I think. So I did some design agency in Leeds that was a part of a big conglomerate, so it also had like PR and marketing and advertising. Then I did an advertising agency in Amsterdam and got to learn, work on pan-European accounts, doing fashion things and all shoots. I mean, that's nothing that I'd be able to do, starting my business myself straight away at that age. And then went to a design agency, whereas then, I was senior and was helping mentor the studio and things like that. Those connections let the company fly very quickly. So I would do it that way again.
Yeah.
That was really interesting, actually, and you've linked in really nicely to something that we're going to be covering in a future episode, actually, about the enterprise side of things.
Right.
I think exactly what you've mentioned. You know, sometimes when we talk about the sort of Sheffield Hallam enterprise team and the supports on offer, a lot of the time people go, well, I don't want to start my own business. Why would I bother? But of course, you know, all the stuff that they offer in terms of support, so kind of marketing, personal branding, sort of business understanding type of webinars and workshops, still really useful, regardless of whether you want to set that business up.
Super useful. I mean, but that's what I say about making mistakes and learning on someone else's money. Like, some companies even have funds for that stuff, you know, check that out. That's something I didn't do enough and I would do this time. Like, negotiate into your salary so much money for courses or events, you know, going learning stuff, all that stuff. And when you can do those enterprise schemes, you've got time to do it if you're not trying to run a business for the first time ever from scratch.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we'll do is we'll again kind of put the information about the enterprise team support, the careers team support for anyone who's listening to this from Sheffield Hallam into the episode notes. And as Penny's mentioned there, definitely taking advantage.
Yeah, do it. Absolutely do it.
Fantastic. Okay, so Penny, kind of moving on to the last point, really, I suppose. At the end of the podcast, we always like to finish with a nice sort of ray of positivity before we end. And I suppose the last thing we've really got to ask you is just any advice you might have for any professionals. This could be students, graduates, or other job seekers, or even currently employed professionals, just in terms of the best way to, I suppose, make it through the current situation, whether that be related to their career, mental health and wellbeing, anything like that.
Well, I think for people in the job, get the bounce back loan scheme. So this is just super practical, but I put it out on my Instagram stories and I had a few people getting in touch who hadn't heard of it. And the government is saying it'll be on the table till November, but I don't think it will. I think it's been really popular. And I've had it on good advice and good authority and with a lot of research. It's super easy to apply for. So they were doing all the nonsense stuff in the beginning with loads of forms and forecasts and that. You literally, if you're a sole trader or a limited company, you can apply for 25% of your turnover. So not even your profit, your turnover, by simply putting in 25% of your turnover and your name. And it goes in your bank. Mine, Starling started with it this week. The high street banks were doing it already the week before. And you don't pay anything for 12 months and you can just pay it back at the 12 months if you don't need to touch it. And when you do, it's really low. And I just say it's just just having a buffer. We don't know where this is going. There's warnings of recession and all the rest of it. You don't know what other help is going to come. It's government backed. They're not doing credit checks. My credit's good, but they're not doing credit checks. And it's just that it is that simple and putting it in. And I would just say, just for peace of mind, because you think best creatively when you don't have that stress. And if it's just a buffer and just to know it's there, I think just practically do that. There's a self-employment grant as well, which is even better because you don't need to pay that back. But if you're a limited company, you can't have that, so I can't do that. But the loan itself, I'm not a big one for debt and I don't like loans, but this is the only bit of help, like real help that they've given. So that would be the first one. And then second, I would just say again, repeat what I said in the beginning, people, connect with people, find people, right? Start connections, start relationships. I've done it myself. I've met some incredible people. There's some great stuff coming out of it. You know, do that. There are collaborative projects that you could instigate at the moment. Even if you just watched one thing a day, like an hour a day for all this time, that would have been a lot already. You know? So break it down and just see what connections you can make through this time as well. Because, as we said, people are being more open than they've been for a long time. Yeah. And the access has been, you know, people are, here's my number, here's my Zoom, here's my whatever, like, do it.
I think that fits in really well with the actual theme of Mental Health Awareness Week this year, which is be kind. I think you were mentioning to us just before the podcast, Penny, some stuff on that front, I guess, and how important that is at the moment.
Well, just be kind and patient with yourself and with others, which is it Jerry Springer that you
What's a throwback?
He was onto something, that Jerry, apart from a really obnoxious TV show that was just grim. It was a bit cold at the end, but yeah, just being kind and patient. Like everyone, like you could be in a flow and it goes great, and you cannot be, and it's just taking more time, and that's for yourself and with other people. So if you go around badgering people or getting aggressive, like no one's going to want it. Just be gentle, be kind, be patient, and continue doing that when we're out of this as well, because it's not a bad habit to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that, to coin the Jerry Springer phrase again, on that thought for the day, that sort of brings us directly to the end of the podcast. So we have to say thank you so much, Penny, for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's really lovely to be asked, and lovely questions, lovely to think about this stuff.
Brilliant. And yeah, thank you for all the really, really kind of useful insights and reflections about the sector. We're going to be sharing all of the sort of recommendations, sources, links that Penny's mentioned in the episode notes for the podcast when it's published. So keep an eye on those. And if you've got any questions, do get in touch with Helen or I, and we can field any questions that might come up. But thank you once again to Penny for joining us today, and have a lovely day, everybody listening at home. If you've been interested in anything that we've talked about on today's podcast, do get in touch with us via the comment threads on the podcast link, wherever you're listening. We'll be tuning in again next week with a guest soon to be announced. And each week when we announce the guest, we'll be giving you a chance to put questions to the special guest in advance of the podcast. Thanks for tuning in and listening to us here on The New Normal.